So I met you in Washington, D.C.
Hmm.
just recently. We were both attending the Washington Conference for the American Legion. I
Yes.
sat behind you,
Hmm.
and you, during part of the panel at the Veteran Employment and Education Day committee meeting, if you will, during the fireside chat, you stood up and talked a little bit about your PhD project and a question. And
Yes.
I'm like, oh my gosh, love her. I loved you immediately. I was like, oh my gosh. So, welcome to
Yeah.
Spotlight on Spirit.
Thank you.
This is a podcast that the Department of Minnesota American Legion hosts, and it's all things religious, spiritual, faith, and we tie them all together and we just create this wonderful safe space. So, I look forward to hearing more about you. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are? Do you belong to the American Legion in any capacity?
Yeah, so I am a member of the American Legion Auxiliary from the Department of District of Columbia.
Okay,
Yeah.
wonderful. And
Yeah.
you go by.
I go by Lauren Lloyd.
Okay.
People, I am actually an ordained minister. So some people call me Rev, some call me
Oh, yeah.
Pastor. Most people just call me Lauren.
Yeah, most people just call me Kelley too, but
Yeah.
every once in a while.
Yeah.
Um, and you said something, you said you don't normally lead out with that.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
I don't, because people have expectations based on their experiences, and a
Yeah.
lot of people, especially the population that we work with for my faith-based nonprofit, is
Mhm.
people that have been kind of hurt by people in organized religion of some sort. And
Mm,
so when they hear the word pastor, it almost kind of creates this expectation
mhm.
about me that's not me. So,
Right.
yeah, if I
Yeah.
feel led to say, yeah, I'm a pastor, and then I do, but I don't usually lead with that. No.
Yeah, the expectations, and sometimes it can just be actually a trigger for
Yeah.
some people I've experienced.
Hmm.
But that doesn't negate the experience and the education that goes behind becoming someone who can sit with another human being.
Right.
Yeah. Um, you had mentioned a little bit about your PhD project because you're in a program right now.
I am. I just
And
started in my dissertation phase, so I am actually
yeah,
working right now on creating my prospectus, which is my proposal for my research. And then once that's approved, then I'll begin my research.
it's quite a process, isn't it?
Yes. And because I chose to work with a population that's a vulnerable population for people who
Oh,
have been challenged with substance use issues or been in
mhm,
addiction and are now in recovery, it's an even more sensitive topic. And for in talking about people who have been through some sort of trauma and substance use, so that
mhm,
like double the intensity
mhm,
of it. So
mhm.
there are a lot of precautions that I need to make sure I have in place before I even begin my research to make sure people are safe, and that I'm not
Yeah,
violating any ethical rules or laws. Mhm.
yeah. I appreciate that. What encouraged you? Were you placed on the Veteran Employment and Education? How did you decide to show up at that
So,
committee?
workforce development is a passion of mine,
Mhm.
and because I've seen so many challenges for people, for veterans, and others, especially spouses, because I was an Air Force spouse. My husband retired after 20 years in the Air Force, and my dad was in the Army. So I grew up in the military culture. Literally, I was born in an Army hospital, and then, the military has always been a family to me. And so seeing the challenges firsthand of how hard it has been for people to find gainful employment after joining the military or after leaving the military,
Yeah.
is something that I'm very passionate about.
And it's very impactful on your sense of security.
Yeah,
Are we going to be able to meet the bills? Planning for kids.
sure.
Oh, there's so much that goes along with that. I was quite pleasantly surprised at the level of information of the attendees and how they're working to really negate some of the challenges or the barriers that military spouses have, as well as kids that are supporting their military member.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
We're
so,
pretty resilient military
yeah,
families.
that's what I've come to appreciate is the
Yeah.
resiliency, the
Hmm.
flexibility, the
Yeah.
adaptability
Yes.
that comes along with being a spouse or a military member,
Right. And
child.
I don't think we encourage people enough when it comes to that. Like you need to use that as an asset.
Hmm.
You know, your availability to adapt to different environments quickly. I mean, if you've ever been stationed
Yeah.
overseas, then you know what it's like to be kind
Hmm.
of isolated from your family, like your biological family, but
Yeah.
you make friends quickly. And then, even when we were stationed overseas, we still are friends, really good friends with people we were stationed with, because you kind of never, I don't know. It's easy. You don't have to explain anything. If people know that you've been in the military or you've been, you
Hmm.
know, stationed overseas, then it's kind of like a built-in community. Eh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I am led to think about when you're talking about the resiliency and the flexibility piece for military families is you adapt to your environment.
Hmm.
Your environment doesn't define who you are.
Yeah.
So you learn to adjust um, to what the external stimuli is or where you find yourself.
Yeah.
And some of the struggles that we have today is individuals that might be looking at the external as an indication of who they are.
Right. And I think that leads back to the whole spirituality piece, right now, and even aside from spirituality, I think we have a culture and a generation of people who are experiencing an identity crisis,
Yeah.
right? People don't know who they're supposed to be or what their purpose is. And that's probably the number one thing that we as an organization,
Yeah.
we kind of do not guidance and guiding
Hmm.
and coaching about is identity coaching, or even how to discover who you are or what your value is, and how to identify what's truth and what's not truth, but also how to create a balance of embracing your emotions but not letting them control you.
Hmm.
And so even looking more at a strength-based approach instead of looking at a deficit-based approach.
Yeah. Which is a total shift in our culture. And I am so happy for it.
Yes.
I think it's needed, necessary, and it's going to be very helpful.
Mhm.
You are connected with workforce development. Is that right?
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
We do a lot of things, yeah, like that.
Okay.
Hmm.
And one of the things that we experienced during that day was this fireside chat where they were looking at some of the alternatives. I think it was the alternatives or what's happening in the suicide prevention world because there's a lot of movement that's happening.
Yes, so
Yeah.
much. It was so exciting to be there and hear the panelists talk about the importance of looking at a holistic approach.
Hmm.
Now, I've heard this for years. Probably, so let me clarify.
Hmm.
I've been in the substance use continuum of care arena for about 25 years.
Okay.
And so that really is my passion, is to find um, root causes to help people move out of addiction, or even for prevention and
Hmm.
different things. So the prevention, intervention, and recovery sphere is where a lot of my work has been done. And so we as society are very reactionary
Yeah.
because prevention is kind of hard to prove,
Yeah.
because although prevention has been proven in science to work, there's no definitive, oh,
Yep.
because this person did this, then they never did this, right?
Yep.
Because
Yep.
it's hard to quantify that. There
Yes.
are some studies out there that have shown it reduces risk,
Mhm.
but there's no way to actually prove, okay, this actually led to this. Unless you go into more qualitative studies, which are people's experiences,
Yep.
shared experiences, right?
And yeah, I think there's less money in the qualitative field than there is in the quantitative field. And so I have a little bit of cynicism when it comes to the research because we
Sure.
really do have to follow the money.
Yeah.
Who's paying for the study,
Correct.
and do they
Correct.
have a vested interest in the outcome of that study?
Correct.
So to find someone that is ambivalent of the outcome can be difficult in
Hmm.
today's world when it costs a lot of money to do a quantitative research because there is a lot of IRB processes you really have to go through, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
But
And but you brought up a good point though, like, in research and actually in public health, we're supposed to be um unbiased,
mhm,
right? But unfortunately, it's become very politicized, and people are not looking just at the science. They're looking at more than that. And like you said, it all comes down to
yeah,
money. And even this idea of a holistic approach, a lot of people in the field are not all in on this idea.
yeah,
Even one of the panelists, I believe, was doing equine therapy. I
yeah,
love this idea.
yes.
And it's been proven to be so successful, but yet we still can't get insurance companies to pay for that as a valid therapeutic methodology.
But then it also gets into how do you quantify that quantitative aspect of something
Exactly.
that is so subjective. And so then therefore insurance companies are care plan goal oriented. They need to have an outcome.
That's true. And there are very few longitudinal studies following
Mhm.
spirituality as a modality or protective factor for risky behavior. There
Yeah.
recently, within the last 5 to 10 years, there's actually been a little bit more talk about it.
Mhm.
But still, even as I'm doing my research and looking for literature reviews, it's been really difficult to find. But
Mhm.
one study that, and I think I mentioned it in my comments at the panel, was
Mhm.
that one study out of Baylor University showed that I believe it was like 84% of Americans say that they have a spiritual background or upbringing.
Mhm.
And then it was 53%
Mhm.
said that they wished that their therapist would integrate some kind of a spiritual modality into their treatment plan. And so when I saw that, I thought that's a pretty large number. And then I
Mhm.
thought, well, how could we incorporate spirituality into a modality? And then I thought to myself, wait, because the reason why I decided to do this, and so let me back up.
Uh-huh.
So my research question that I'm looking into is spirituality a factor in post-traumatic growth and substance use recovery?
Beautiful question.
And I really want to know, like, what are the things that helped people. And I'm gonna use hopefully my participants will be able to have been in recovery for 3 or more years. And so I'm looking to really understand, like, how does it impact people's lives? And the challenge is, like you said, with chaplains, like, we know prayer works because we've seen it firsthand, but we're not good at quantifying it or even cataloging it or even taking a look and seeing how, like, progression in somebody's life works,
Yeah.
with that. But, like you were saying, when it comes to the medical outcomes, right? We have right now there this focus on inclusion is so huge, but it's not really a true inclusion is what I'm
Mhm.
finding.
Mhm.
Um, People want to keep church and state separate, which is wonderful. I think it's wonderful that you can do that. But I'm not asking people to proselytize. I'm not asking
Right.
people to force one choice or another. I'm just asking for a fair choice and a true inclusion.
Right.
If we are talking about providing everything that a person needs to be well, then we need to offer them every option, right? And spirituality is a key piece of wellness. And you know
Mhm.
this, and I know
Mhm.
this, but it's such a heavy word. It's so
It is.
loaded that people don't want
Yes.
to talk about it.
I don't think we have the language, Lauren. I don't think we know how to talk about who we are spiritually
Mm,
apart from organized faith.
right.
And I think that's probably the next step is like, what are those commonalities that we have as human beings that are
Hmm.
spiritual? that are
Right.
separate from a cognitive or the physical reality.
Right.
Mm,
Well, and one of the things that I brought up in the panel was really geared towards the mental health community.
yeah.
Like, hey, we are all doing intake forms. If we could just add the one question, could you benefit from spiritual enrichment? Just adding the one question. That doesn't mean you need to provide it for them. You
Yes.
can refer them to someone else who has been properly vetted. That's so important.
Yep.
I'm not saying you just let, Reverend Bob do his thing. I'm just saying that there needs to be a process. But having that option for people could open a huge new, like, holistic approach for somebody who's seeking something that you're not providing for them.
Yep. Vetting piece is important, but what chaplains and pastors, religious subject matter experts, if you will, all should learn at this point, in their experience of being a faith leader, is how to companion with another human being.
That's good.
Right?
Yeah,
You're
that's
just
really
coming
good.
alongside and inquiring. That question of inquiry has always been a part of faith.
Right.
Because I think all faith groups, all organized religions, and then spiritual philosophies have that concept of companioning, that everyone's on their own journey,
Right.
and we have this commonality, but now what is it?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that for me, faith has a very, very vested interest, and we're stakeholders in the spiritual health, that functional medicine piece. So I like your research.
Yeah, I'm
People
excited.
want it.
I was joking with my committee chair, and she just looked at me. She goes, "You've got to bring it back, Lauren." She says, "You can save the rest of the research for postdoctoral work. We just need to get the dissertation done first." So, there's so much out there, and I think it's really an opportunity for us to kind of go to a field that has not been scientifically proven in a lot of things. Johns Hopkins actually put out an article on the positive effects of prayer on your brain.
Yep.
And so I'll have to go back and look, and I can't, sorry for the citations, but I remember they did it and I thought, wow, that was Hopkins. That's a pretty big name for the health community. And so even, we know generally as people, like, the power of forgiveness.
Yes.
How just forgiving somebody, or even forgiving yourself for something, what kind of weight that lifts off of you, and it really attributes your mental health to to something better. But the details,
we keep it on the periphery.
Yes.
To a large degree. We're uncomfortable, and we don't have the language.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that who's paying for that care comes into, because historically, right? Like-minded individuals that belong to that religion supported that religion.
Right.
And so it was a closed loop system. And
yeah, but I have a real problem with, why can someone's insurance cover Reiki treatments, but yet if someone wants to see a healing practitioner to receive healing, that's not covered. Like I said, going back to the inclusion piece, you can't say, like, this is an option, but yet this is not, based on religious preference. And Reiki is deeply rooted in Buddhism and a lot of different things. Mindfulness is Buddhist practice, and yoga is classified as a religion, but yet organizations will freely open their doors to it. And some of these are like the most popular programs, but yet other religions are not invited. And I have a real problem with that. That's not inclusive. That's not inclusive.
No, that's a sore spot, isn't it?
It is.
If prayer, community, those are also sources of healthfulness.
Exactly.
Yeah. Serving, that's the American Legion.
Right.
But serving another human being really is the concept of love.
It is. And compassion, right?
And
kindness.
Compassion. Yes.
Right. And the Legion is great, right? Service, not self, or service above self. Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The American Legion just came out with a mission statement, was it a couple years ago, where it's the well-being of the veteran that is their concern. So the American Legion says it's the well-being, which is a pretty big umbrella. And so
Right.
it includes that spirituality piece. So I'm always very thankful for the American Legion that they didn't narrowly define it, even
Yeah,
though they don't
definitely.
understand it completely, because we have such a long history
Yeah.
of faith, religion, and understanding the importance of somebody's spirituality.
Yeah.
And so, like you, I want to be on at the table.
Same. And
Yes.
then that's all I'm asking, and I
Yeah.
had gone to a mixer for an organization that works with veterans, and they're pretty prominent. And I love them. Our auxiliary unit does events for them. We support them. And I was there, but on behalf of my organization. And so, people, well, what do you do? That's the first in DC. People don't ask where you're from. It's like, what do you do? That's the very first thing they ask you. So then I explained, like, oh, I'm a co-director of a faith-based organization. This, oh, we don't offer faith-based programs. I said, I think you guys do. I think you offer like, stress management classes, meditation, and yoga, and before I could say anything and the other person could say anything, somebody comes up, oh yeah, that's our like most popular class. Everybody loves it. And I didn't even have to say anything. I said, all I'm asking for is, equal representation. Like you don't have to, people can choose what they want to participate in. We're not asking anybody to force somebody. We're just saying, we'll just have it as a choice. It's
Yep.
kind of like a buffet. Nobody's forcing you.
Exactly.
Nobody's
A list
forcing
of
you
resources.
to eat the chocolate sundae, but it's an option if you want it.
Right.
It's there. Hmm.
Because that can be a huge, I think that's one of the things that faith groups could also provide is, this is what we believe and this is how we believe it,
And not
in a
vilify those
resource,
who don't believe the same as you.
and not vilify this. Yes, exactly.
Have compassion for each other and
Yes.
respect, even if we're different.
Yep,
I think that's important.
exactly. Yeah, and I think that the American Legion, this is my biased opinion, not um, approved by the Department of Minnesota American Legion, but I think that the American Legion can be a leader along, the
I think so.
American Legion Auxiliary. We can lead the way. We have such an eclectic group of individuals, right?
Mhm.
With strong backgrounds in the military that understand flexibility, like
Right.
yourself, right? And so well traveled too. Yeah. So I think that we can create that blueprint of how we do it. And it sounds like you're doing it
Trying.
in your lane.
Sometimes it feels like I'm pioneering out in the Wild West.
Yeah, you're all alone out there.
Yes.
But I was so encouraged to hear you. I'm like, oh, I'm not the only one. So I think the time is right for us to just move forward into identifying those components that are spiritual, create that resource list, create the database. And I think this is probably my project because you already have a PhD that you're working on. But what do we do? And then support one another in that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and be open, even if it's not the traditional modality. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
people look at how the stigma has changed for therapy in the last 10, 15 years. Like nobody would go, if you told somebody you went to see a therapist,
Uh-huh.
it would be very
Oh,
stigma inducing, right? They would judge you. But now it's, everybody should have someone to talk to. Like go see a
mm-hmm.
therapist, or mental health is important. Like, so we've seen huge advances in perceptions of what mental health is. But I
Yeah.
think what we're not seeing though is the willingness for us to say that there are other ways besides prescribing someone medication. And I love
Mm-hmm.
that several of the panelists said we need to kind of get away from that, because now we're looking at a huge opioid crisis all across America. And so we need to look at non-pharmacological solutions. And so
Yeah.
equine therapy is one of those. Spiritual enrichment is another one of those.
Yeah.
And I think we want people to be well. And I love there was a term that was coined. I was just on a webinar that talked about actually measuring post-traumatic growth.
Uh-huh.
And it talked about how we as a field need to shift our language and not look at so many of the negatives around trauma, right? And
Mhm.
we need to talk more about the resiliency and the post-traumatic growth that people are overcoming every day, that they're coming into. And I love they didn't use the term wellness or well-being,
Uh-huh.
they used the term well-becoming.
Well becoming.
And I loved that because, we're all in a journey of,
Yep.
bettering ourselves or even improving ourselves. And so it was a really beautiful way to say, hey, I know that you're on this journey, right? And just having some grace for people for that.
You at the beginning you talked about the strength based.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I hear more and more strength based
Sure.
communication.
Yeah, and and someone mentioned it I keep referring back to that panel because that's where we
Uh-huh.
met, but someone did mention that, there are a lot of people who have served in the military who have not experienced trauma. So you can't
Yep.
assume that because you serve in the military, you have some kind of traumatic experience,
Yep.
right? And so I loved that someone said that. But going back to the strength based, when we when we coach people through their life experience, we just ask them, like, what if instead of looking at things as triggers to remind you of traumatic events, what if you look at events that are what I call glimmers of
Mm.
hope, right? So things that remind you of how you've overcome something. Because literally what you think on, it creates a neural pathway in your brain. And the
Yep.
more you think about it, the deeper those pathways get.
Yep.
And if it's always negative, then of course you're going to feel like you're spiraling because you're literally creating these pathways in your brain and it's changing your brain, makeup, your physical brain makeup.
What you think
Yes.
changes your physicality.
Yes, exactly. So if we stop saying that I'm triggered and start focusing things on, okay, let's look at what my strengths are. How did I get through this? And then focus on those. So when you're in a situation and you feel like you're going to be triggered about a trauma, just stop in that moment and focus on, okay, what was the thing that got me through this? And that's your immediate response. Can you imagine what a change that would be for people? When that thought started coming, you said, no, wait, that's not who I am anymore. I've already gone through this.
Yep.
And what brought me through this? Oh, this was the thing that got me through it.
That
Right. And then,
self-reflection piece.
yeah, self-reflection,
Yeah.
but making it a habit, because you have to choose to do this, right? You have to choose to be strong. I mean, sometimes it's hard. Like we choose to get out of bed every morning. Sometimes there are days that people, I don't want to get out of bed. I'd rather
Right.
stay in bed and read a book all day.
Right.
But we have to be adults and we have to live in this world. And I can't just hide in my room and read a book.
Fine. There's that active sense of self that you're talking
Exactly.
about, where when we are passive, we think that we have no ability to determine the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we think about that self-reflective piece, that there's active choices that you can do.
Exactly.
Right? Okay.
Yeah. And comparison is a killer of hope and dreams. It is. Stop comparing yourself to other people's experiences. Your experience is not somebody else's experience. How they came through it or how they survived is not how necessarily you're going to do it. Right. And once we realize that there is no cookie cutter approach, there are great suggestions and models and programs that we can use, but individually, we're all different. We're all different people. So how we respond to things, how we react to things are going to be different. And I'm really hoping that there's more research out there that shows that. We're talking about cultural competent behavior or cultural competent programming. In doing that, we need to recognize that not everybody's going to have the same experience we have. So we need to make room for that, right? In how we address things. And And we
Yep.
can't, if they react differently, we can't just label them as something else or being symptomatic of something different. No, well, maybe they just have a different cultural experience than we do,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
And so we just need to be a little bit more accommodating as people to create a little bit more room, right?
Yes. Make your table longer, make it
Yeah,
bigger.
I love it. Yes,
Yes. And be a little curious.
always.
Yes.
One of the things that I remember the most was by a mentor of mine, and he said, "I always make it a point that whoever's in front of me, that I learn something and I take away
Mm,
something from the conversation, because then that gives me an expectation like I'm going to glean some wisdom from this person."
mhm.
Right? And I just
Yep.
thought that's a really great perspective, because if
Yep.
you have that expectation, then you're engaged
Mhm.
and you're validating that they're a person, that they've had experiences, and maybe you can learn something from them, not just automatically seeing a person and then making a decision on who they are or what they have to offer you,
Yep.
right?
There's always this positional jostling that we have with each
Hmm.
other, don't we? Like, who are you in connection with me? And the protective measure. There's always these layers
Yes.
where if you're leaning in, it's another human being. That connection is spiritual.
Yeah, it
There's no
is.
competition in spirituality.
Right.
There's just a connecting.
Yeah.
And I think that we could really do well by examining and being students of what is our connecting and what is our curiosity about one another.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, he was very wise. Yeah. Like, I got to learn something.
But it also helps us to not put expectations on ourselves,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
And so, we as people, especially Americans, I don't see it as often in other cultures, but in America,
mm-hmm.
we tend to have to find a nice box that we fit in,
Yeah.
right? So a category like I'm Lauren, I'm Korean American, and these
Mhm.
things. Like I feel like I have to define myself or identify as something, right? And I think when we do that, we really cut ourselves short. And if we just, what, I'm Lauren, and I'm just here to hear what you have to say, and there's no expectation or judging. And that's why I don't lead with I'm a pastor, because there's this immediate, you would not believe how many people sharpen up, like they straighten up and they start, "Oh, I'm sorry for my language," and just those things.
Yes.
And
Apologizing and
totally.
sorry, Pastor. And no,
The
I
biggest
just lost the
compliment.
humanness
Yeah,
of
right.
this conversation.
Yes. The biggest compliment I think I got regarding the whole reverend title was, "Oh, you don't look like a pastor." I said, "Really?
Yeah.
Thanks."
Right. Like, what do
And
they look like? Tell me.
exactly. Tell me.
I'm curious. Yes. I think spirituality has so much to
Mm,
offer
yes.
if we get the language or we learn how to connect and
Hmm.
remain curious.
Yeah.
Yes. And the humility piece, right? You were talking
So
about the
big.
humility piece,
Yes, so
about being
big.
curious,
Yeah.
hmm
Yeah.
which is something that might be a little un-American, the vulnerability.
It well, we're a individualistic society.
Yeah.
Right? We're not a community-based society. So, like for me, I'm Korean American, so we're very like community oriented. Like
Hmm.
what's better for the whole, not what's better for me. It's what's better for the whole people, which can be good and bad. On both parts. Individualistic is great
Right.
because you're self-empowerment. You feel like you can do things on your own. But then again, sometimes you exclude people, and there's no grace for people that don't think like you, which I think we've seen an increase of lately. It's you can't even have conversations with people nowadays without people getting like offended or um, having it's okay to be different.
It's
One of the
okay.
yeah, one of the I think it was Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she said about her relationship with Justice Scalia, is that we were very different politically, but we were still friends. We could have these conversations. And unfortunately, we don't see that anymore. There's not a lot of good examples of people that are so different, like in ideology, but yet they can still be friends.
Right. Like, how do you make room in your mind for seeing beyond what they believe
Yeah,
and look at who they are?
exactly.
Mm. Yeah, grace and mercy to me are like these practices
Hmm.
that we keep maybe on a worship day
Instead of a lifestyle.
or as the lifestyle
Yeah,
practice, because it
yeah.
costs you something to
Mm.
be graceful. It
Yeah.
costs you to be merciful.
Hmm.
It costs you to forgive. But is it worth the cost to connect as a community, right? And if we're so individually vested, then we're not willing to pay that price.
Well, and most people just want to know what's in it for them.
Right. Whiff them. I
It's
learned
the
about whiff them. Yeah.
right. It's about this whole instant gratification. Like, you can have everything you want now. So why invest in something that takes time? This is the challenge
Yeah.
that we're having now, especially with the younger generations coming up. Um, what I find interesting though is, and there was just a study about a month ago that came out with Gen Z.
Mm-hmm.
They were saying that they actually wanted less romantic relationships being shown in movies and TV shows
Oh.
because it didn't show a realistic um, expectation of what relationship was.
Oh.
And like I think it was like 58%, I think, or more said that they thought that gratuitous sex scenes were unnecessary. This is really shocking to me because that's not what we think of when we think of. I mean, because Gen Z has kind of gotten the brunt of a lot of people's opinions, right?
Who
And
are the
they've been
Gen Z?
stereotyped.
What age group are they?
Gen Zs, I think, are the ones that are like in their 20s and maybe low 30s right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe that's I don't know the exact dates, but I was really surprised, and they were saying that we just don't know how to have relationship
Yeah.
because it's not being modeled. And I
But
thought that
the
was pretty
desire is still
fascinating. Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
I don't think we can get away from the need to connect and to be with another human being.
Sure.
We're just hardwired that way.
Right.
Yes, into our DNA, and then the spiritual piece that is not physical somehow.
Yeah. And coming through, global trauma, COVID,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
When the whole world just kind of basically shut down, a lot of people took that opportunity to kind of do a lot of introspective thinking. Like, okay, how do I declutter things, not just physically from my life, but,
Yep.
mentally? Like, how do I look at who's important to me?
What
And
matters?
and we've seen a lot of things, yeah, what really matters, and a lot of people even quitting their jobs, I mean, just because they're like, "What the pay is not worth it. I'm not fulfilled." So people
Yeah.
are even looking a little bit more towards like what's better for me and my mental health and wellness.
They're the gift of suffering.
Mhm.
If we were to ever examine that, that's I
Yeah.
think the whole nother conversation. But that what we went through, there can
Right.
be a gift. There can be a clarification, right? Yeah.
Right. Which is
Yeah.
post-traumatic growth for a lot of people,
Yeah.
right? Or resiliency, even like what we were talking about. I think that we discount this idea of suffering and overcoming
Mm-hmm.
because that's actually what makes us stronger and helps us
Mm-hmm.
really learn and mature. But if you don't ever, and nobody ever wants to go through,
No.
I mean,
We're
yeah,
yeah.
but you cannot shield people from going through. If you do, then you end up with a lot of people who are self-entitled and have never had any life experience and think they know everything, right?
and really don't know how to react or how to handle, how to move through
Yeah.
challenging times.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes people are oblivious to the loss of not being able to.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, I hear you. And so
Yeah.
suffering has this invite for us to look at life differently, and that compassion, the capacis
Right.
to suffer with, is part of that connecting piece.
Right. And it teaches us how we can just learn how to listen to people. I think we feel like we have to fix things when really all we have to do is show up and
Just
be
show up.
there for someone, like we're not going to have all the answers, but we can show up and just say, "Hey, if you need someone to talk to, I'm here." Or
That's,
even being honest. Like
yep,
when somebody asks you a question, I mean, we get all kinds of questions, and I'm comfortable with saying, "I don't know,"
right,
or "I don't understand why." I don't feel like I have to give you an answer for things, for everything, because there's some things I can't answer.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the American Legion's buddy checks
Mhm.
really just started out that way.
Yes, I love
Yeah.
those.
Yes. Don't turn them into a membership tool. Don't turn
Nope.
them into anything
Mhm.
else. Just the reaching out. Hey, how you doing? Just
Yeah.
wanted to connect. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah.
So, thank you for your time. Do you have words of wisdom or anything else that's on your mind?
I think that we need to stop being afraid to
Ah,
connect.
okay.
I think at the root of all of this is our hearts and our minds are battling each other based on our experiences.
Mm,
And so the one thing that I have tried hard to learn, and I'm still working on it, is to not be offended. One,
mm,
I've done a pretty good job on not being offended, me personally,
uh-huh.
against anything, but I'm working on not being offended on behalf of other people now. So, so you can offend me all day long, but talk
Uh-huh.
about my sister or my family, no way.
My
Yeah,
kids.
yeah, or my husband, yeah,
Yes.
definitely, yeah. So just we really need to just follow that golden rule: treat people how you want to be treated. I think if we really, really followed that, then we would stop for a moment before we responded to things or reacted to things and just take a breath.
The exhale, the
Hmm.
inhale, give your
Exactly.
mind a chance.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
definitely.
I have enjoyed getting to know you more. I'm so
Yes.
excited that I might be able to develop our relationship further.
Yeah.
And I wish you all the luck and all the blessings with your PhD, because
Thank you.
it's a lot of work,
I will
Lauren.
need it.
Yes.
Yes.
So I wish you well.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Kelly. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right.